Yay, it's Fearless Friday, folks. Are you ready for action? Today, we're talking about how ambitious women build influence by creating the human connection whilst everyone else is waiting. Welcome to Unshakable Her, the podcast helping women in leadership build the influence, visibility and presence to make promotion inevitable. I'm your host, Caroline Esterson. Let's get started. So, as you know, I always like to tell you up front why you should bother listening. So here goes. Today, you're going to get one simple question that changes how you approach every work interaction. So you stop defaulting to more meetings and start to create the outcome that you actually want. You're going to walk away with 3 tiny practical moves you can use before Monday to rebuild trust, connection, and influence without needing permission, authority, or a cultural change program. And 3, you're going to understand why being more connected at work matters for your leadership presence, promotion opportunities, and momentum, because influence is built in the small human moments that people remember. Okay, then, so we've named the enemy, we've done the science, we know why the disconnection happens, why it hits us harder than most, and why your brain has been quietly registering the absence of something it needed. So now what? Well, it's Friday, so now we move. Small, specific, and deliberate, not a cultural change program or a conversation with HR. We're not going to wait for your organisation to figure out what it forgot to replace. You, this week, moves you can make before Monday. But before we get into the moves, I want to say one thing. Everything we've talked about this week, the disconnection paradox, the oxytocin gap, the way informal access was already unequal before the world changed, none of that is an excuse to wait. I know it could feel like that, like if the system's the problem, the system has to fix itself before you do anything, but it doesn't. You don't have to fix the whole system. You just have to find the crack, like Cara did, and make that crack slightly bigger so you can fill it. Cara found hers in the quarterly sales meeting. She asked for that 5-minute break. Everybody loved her for it. And the room started breathing again. 2 people said, "Thank God." That's the energy that we're going to bring today. Let me give you a clue for the song this week. Here goes. I keep thinking about something someone said to me recently about how we hold people, colleagues, leader ourselves to an impossible standard, as if being human is a design flaw rather than the whole point. Any ideas as to our song yet? We expect flawless systems, flawless responses, and flawless leadership. And when connection breaks down, we look for someone to blame or something to fix. But sometimes the most useful thing you can do is remember that the person on the other side of that screen is just a person, and they're doing their best in a world that changed faster than anyone managed to plan for. And that matters because the moves we're talking about today are not about being perfect. They're about being present, and those are very different things. So knowing and believing that, here's the question you need. One question. And I want you to try it before you make any contact at work this week, before you book the meeting, send the message, or pick up the phone. And the question is this. What do I want them to know, feel, and do? Not what do I need to tell them, not what's on the agenda. What do I want them to know? How do I want them to feel? And most importantly, what do I want them to do as a result of this interaction? Because when you know the answer to all 3, something shifts. You stop defaulting to the format, things like the email, the Teams meeting, the 30-minute slot, and you start choosing the format that actually creates the outcome that you want. If I want someone to know that they're valued, that they feel seen, and do better work as a result, is a calendar invite the right tool for that? Or is a 2-minute unscheduled call the thing that actually lands better? Most of us never ask the question. We just reach for the default. And that default right now is one that sounds like connection, but is actually a missed opportunity. So instead, Start with the outcome that you want from your interaction and build from there. Got it? Know, feel, do. 3 words. Just try it out this week and see what shifts. So going back to your clues for the song, here's clue 2 for you. There's a lyric in it, and it's about carrying more than you can hold, about the gap between who you're expected to be and who you actually are. I'll tell you where it's from at the end, but for now, just notice if this tickles your memory banks for the song title from July 2016. 3 little moves to make you unshakable, small enough to start Monday, sharp enough to change everything. Now, as you well know, I don't sit on the fence here. Everything we do is about helping you spot the gap and fill it with actions. So easy, you simply can't not do them. So here are your moves for this week. Move 1 is called the Unscheduled 2. This week, reach out to 2 people with no agenda, not a meeting request, not a reply to something they sent, a message, a call, or a voice note, something that tells them, I was thinking about you, how's it going? Then just see what happens. 2 people, that's all. You're not rebuilding the entire culture of your organisation. You're sending 2 signals that say you're in my thoughts. Remember, that signal is disproportionately powerful. The science told us why on Wednesday, and now you get to test it out. And I've got another clue for you now. It's from a different song. I know I'm being greedy this week with 2, but I just couldn't decide because they're both so good. So the clue for the second song this week is this song is about what happens when you actually show up for somebody, not perfectly or with all the answers. You're just present, you're there for them, and you're making the thing possibly that they're going through slightly better than it was before you arrived. Any thoughts? Okay, move 2. This is the meeting margin, and it's a build from last week. Look at your diary for the next week. Find 1 meeting, just 1, and build in 5 minutes at the start, not with an agenda or an icebreaker. There's no structure here. Just, how is everyone? Really? And then just wait for the answer. That margin is where the relationship lives. You just have to decide if it's worth 5 minutes to let it exist. And move 3, the know, feel, do check. Before your next 3 interactions at work, whatever format it is, whatever they are, I want you to ask yourself the question, what do I want them to know, feel, and do? Then choose your format accordingly. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to ask yourself this question, because asking it shifts you from broadcasting to connecting. And that shift is frankly the whole game. So if we look at what these moves create, let's just ask ourselves, so what? What does it matter beyond being a nicer colleague? What actually is the point? Influence at work is built in exactly the kind of moments we've been talking about this week. Small, spontaneous and genuine. The 2-minute call, the margin at the start of the meeting, the message that says, I was thinking of you. And the women who get promoted are not always the most qualified. They are often the most connected. Not in like that political, strategic, transactional way, but in a real human, I know who she is way. And that is built in the 2mm moves over time consistently. You're not waiting for the system to change. You're building your presence within it, 1 small deliberate move at a time. What would Caro do? Sometimes you don't need permission. You just need better advice. Right. What would Caro do this week? It doesn't have a listener question. Instead, I want to go back to the Louise from Monday. You know, that long drive that she had, the 3-hour drive, and the gap that she used to fill her time with calls that made a connection, but now can't. And if I'm honest, I probably would have done exactly what Louise did, and maybe for a lot longer than she did. I'd have adapted, and I've told myself I was fine, and I've noticed something felt slightly off, but probably not quite been able to name it. And then I'd probably, amid frustration that was building, have done something slightly chaotic, if I'm honest with you. I'd have called someone that I hadn't spoken to in months at a completely random time with no reason, just because they did pop into my head. And then I'd have probably, amid frustration that was building, done something slightly chaotic, as is my wont. I'd have called someone I hadn't spoken to in months at a completely random time with no reason, just because they popped into my head. And I'd like to think they'd have been delighted. And I'd have thought, why don't I do this more? Because the thing is, I thrive on spontaneity. Shooting from the hip or winging it isn't my problem. Structure is my problem. So my version of the unscheduled 2 is already a bit instinctive. But the bit that I have to work on is at the deliberate margin, the intentional pause at the start of a meeting, the slow down before I go in. So I hope Wendy, my work wife, is drinking tea while she listens to this. I can see her choking or spilling it down in front of my confession here, because she is, I've said to you before, she has the patience of a saint and she's constantly coaching me on this. I fear I might just be a bit of a lost cause, really, but I promise I'll keep trying. Anyway, enough about me. Think about it this way. Wherever your challenge sits, maybe you're too spontaneous or not enough or somewhere in the middle, the move is always in the direction of more human, less transactional. That is the constant. Okay, so back to the songs. And yes, I did say songs. You have 2 this week because 1 just wasn't enough to hold what we've been talking about. The first one, the one that I've been dropping clues for through this episode, is, of course, Human by Rag and Bone Man. I chose it because this whole trilogy has been underneath everything about the gap between what we expect and what we actually are. We expect systems that connect us. We get ones that organise us. We expect leaders who have it all sorted. We get people doing their best in a world that changed too fast. And we expect ourselves to be fine with it. We are only human. That's not an excuse, but I reckon it's a pretty good starting point. And then your second song this week is Better Place by Rachel Platten. And if you haven't heard it, please go and find it after this. Remember, the Unshakable playlist is in your show notes. Because everything we've talked about this week, the 2-minute call, the margins, the question you ask before you reach out, it's not about fixing the disconnection paradox. Well, not entirely. It's about making things slightly better than they were before you arrived. Because the person who creates a crack in the system, who asks for the 5 minutes, who sends the message with no agenda, well, they're creating a better place, not a perfect one, just one that's better. And that's it. That's the whole thing. And Cara, the week after the regional sales briefing, she did 2 things. Small things, but very deliberate ones. The first came from something that she'd been turning over since she got home that evening. Not the slides, because there had been plenty of those and she was still working through them, but from somewhere else. The sense that the room had received an enormous amount and not been given any space to do anything with it yet. That people had left full but not fed. So she wrote a message to her team. Not a follow-up specifically or a list of actions, but something that went a little bit like this. What a session, eh? I've been processing it since yesterday, and here's where I've landed. I think the bit that matters most for us is X. That's what I keep coming back to, but I'm genuinely curious how you're all feeling about it and what you're taking forward. What landed for you and what are you still sitting with? That's it. She shared her own thinking first, openly and specifically, without pretending she had it all figured out. And then she asked a question or 2, questions that she actually wanted the answer to. 3 people replied before lunch properly, not a thumbs up, not noted thanks, but properly. One of them said something she hadn't even considered. One of them admitted that they were still confused about something they'd been too embarrassed to raise in the room. And one of them said, I'm really glad you asked about that. I wasn't sure anyone else was still thinking about it. The conversation that the briefing hadn't managed to start had started in a message in 5 minutes because she'd asked the right question in the right way. Now, the second message was entirely different. James had been unusually quiet in that room. The quiet of someone who's decided somewhere along the way that this particular room isn't their place. So she didn't reference the meeting. She didn't ask about his actions or his pipeline or anything on the spreadsheet somewhere. She just sent him a little voice note that said, Hey, James, I've been meaning to check in properly for a while. How are you doing? No follow-up was actually required, just I noticed you. His reply came back that evening, longer than she'd expected. It started with, honestly, it's been a bit of a tough few months, and then he told her why. She hadn't known because nobody had asked before now, because the spontaneous call that might have surfaced it 6 weeks ago never happened, because the 2 minutes before the meeting got swallowed by logistics, and because the system they were all working inside had quietly removed the moments where that kind of thing just gets said. Cara hadn't fixed any of that, but she had created a crack. One conversation that wouldn't have happened without her noticing, and deciding that noticing wasn't enough, that she had to do something with what she saw. 2 messages, 2 completely different registers, but both of them grounded in what she felt in that room. Both landing as a signal that said, "You're in my thoughts, even when not in my eyesight." Ted was at the door when she got home, full attention, not wondering whether now was a good moment or whether she'd be welcome. Just, "I'm here. I noticed and I'm here." Cara crouched down next to him and thought, imagine if we were even half as good at this as Ted is. She was getting there, 2 messages at a time. Let's land what you're taking from today. You've got the outcome question to ask. The one that asks, what do you want people to know, feel and do as a result of this? 3 words that change every interaction when you remember to ask them before you default to the format. You've got 3 moves, the unscheduled 2, the meeting margin and the no, feel, do check. They're small and specific and actionable immediately. No waiting. But you got something else too. The understanding that influence isn't built in the boardroom or the big presentation or the moment you finally feel ready. It's built in the message James didn't expect. The question that gave someone permission to say the thing that had been too embarrassed to raise in the room. The 2 minutes that made the meeting feel like a meeting again. Those are the moments people remember. Those are the moments that build your reputation, your presence, and your promotional path forward long before anyone puts it in writing. So 3 episodes this week with a single thread running through all of them. We have more tools to connect than any generation before us, and we have never felt more professionally alone. That is the disconnection paradox. It's real, it's structural, and it's not your fault. But you don't have to be a passenger in it either. Cara isn't, Louise is starting to see that she isn't, and neither are you. The moves are small, the science is clear, and the crack in the system is yours to make wider. Next week, we're going to be exploring what happens when you get promoted, and specifically, what are the things that no one prepares you for so you can be armed and ready. But that's Monday. For now, have a fabulous weekend. So that's it from me this week. Before you go, if something this week made you nod, laugh, or think, finally someone said it, leave a rating wherever you're listening. Just a couple of taps, that's all it takes. And it helps other women just like you who are spiraling and searching for help to find this show. I'm Caroline Esterson. You came here for career advice, but what you're really building, week by week, move by move, is someone no one can shake. See you Monday.